in terms of the pension scheme selection, Rebecca, I mean, there's a lot of accountants are concerned as to whether they can provide that kind of advice and whether it's regulated advice. So can accountants advise clients on which pension to choose?
Clearly, for many accountants, pensions really isn't their area of expertise, and they might feel pretty uncomfortable about getting involved in that area. So what we're saying is that they may want to give information about the pension schemes that are available, and going back to Neil's point, if they have bureau services, they may even say, we provide this service and we provide this payroll software with these pension companies, and these are our costs, and you can choose to use one of those if you wish, or you can go outside and find other pension providers. They could direct them to the Pension Regulator's website and the ABI and NAPF, where there are lists of pension providers. So I think accountants need to feel comfortable about what it is that they can do, especially when you consider that there are sometimes maybe a grey area where an employer may also be someone that they're talking to individually. And if you give pensions advice to an individual, that is regulated advice. Right. So it's having all of these things in mind and doing what you're comfortable with doing. And of course, as the regulator, we're very keen that employers choose good quality pension schemes, and we will want accountants to point employers towards those principles that lay behind. So having good default funds, having low charges, for example, might be some considerations.
Mm. And sort of adding on to that, really, I mean, many accountants that we've spoken to feel that they're not an expert on pensions. They don't want to get drawn into a situation where perhaps they're being seen to give advice when they're not trying to give advice. So what we're really saying is that unless you do feel that you're sufficiently expert to give, you know, a good advice on pensions, meaning which pension scheme provider, which pension scheme fund potentially to offer, particularly the default fund, which 99% of people who get automatically enrolled we think are going to stay in that default pension fund for the entire membership. It's to keep it fact-based, to give the facts but not express an opinion, and also to make quite clear to the employer that it's their responsibility, their duty, to make these decisions, to choose the pension scheme provider, to choose the pension scheme. But indications in the marketplace are such that the smaller micro-employers are not necessarily going to get a very wide list of choices. We think that there's going to be a decreasing number of pension providers who want their business. We think there will be enough, there will be choice, but it's not necessarily going to be an endless list. So it might be quite practical for an accountant to say, well, I'm aware, my knowledge of the market is such that I know that these 6 providers, 8 providers are going to offer you a pension scheme, so why don't you go and have a look at what they offer and think about these things. And the Pension Regulator has a short brochure on our website which effectively says, here are some questions to ask any pension provider that you might be thinking of taking a scheme from, or questions to consider when you're looking at their website and their brochures. So how to select a good scheme, we can provide some guidance on that.
Great, thank you. And there's been a lot of talk about sort of a capacity crunch maybe a couple of years down the line when these smaller micro businesses start to stage. What's the sort of likely situation do you think when we get there? Is our Nest going to take in a lot of these businesses, would you say? Or?
Well, when you talk about capacity crunch, there's actually a number of facets to that, because some people talk about capacity crunch and what they're saying is, well, will they be able to get a pension scheme? Others talk about, will they actually be able to get a software or a solution that works seamlessly, because a number of pension providers do offer assessment. If you send the payroll data to them every pay cycle, upload it, then you can download the results, but you have to feed that back into payroll to actually make sure that you're taking the contribution deductions for the people who've been automatically enrolled. But there's also, you could argue, the advice gap, because if the smaller micros need someone to help them, particularly to set it all up in the first place, even if perhaps when it's running cycle by cycle there's less need for any advice, then will there be sufficient advisors out there to actually help them? And I think all three of those really have similar facets, because I think there is capacity, but not all at once. It's a bit like saying the road network sort of works okay most of the time, but if you leave it until Friday afternoon before a bank holiday weekend, then you're going to be in some serious traffic. So I think it comes back to make sure that you don't leave it to the last moment, and make sure you do not assume that you will get the help that you need as quickly as you like. And there's a very good chance that you're going to be paying more if you're trying to get products, services or advice if you've left it to the last moment than if you'd actually done it in a much more timely and planned way.
Yeah. So sort of 12 months preparation before you stage. And
start 12 months. I mean, think about it. You've got financial budgets to think about, you know. There may well be some additional costs associated with doing this, both in terms of paying the contributions in the pension scheme and setting up whatever it is you need to set up. So it's probably good practice to start thinking about that. And so really the regulator's advice is start planning 12 months in advance, and plan to have in place your pension scheme. Not necessarily you're using it, but you've got the agreement from the pension scheme provider. And similarly with your software. And actually there's one other lessons learned, which is test these systems. Do a test run. Send a test file to the pension provider, and it's likely to tease out all those data problems you didn't know you had. Like perhaps someone's got their date of birth filled, and what's been entered is the date they joined the company, so they look like they're 18 months old, for example. So that's likely to be picked up by the pension provider and say, I think these people might be a little bit too young.
Yeah.